It wasn't until another guest came on the show and said he was on his college campus and he bumped into this young woman and he was like, "Ush, ush." And he said the look on this her face was like, "How dare you tell me to hush and be quiet?" And then he realized, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. And so I look back at that and I laugh, but I'm also so sorry that, I didn't even get an opportunity to explain that was clearly a miscommunication.
Welcome to the Immigrant Experience in America, an immigrant human library, where we amplify and humanize the experiences of immigrants in the United States and around the world. Listen in as we add another story to our immigrant human library.
The barrel children, for anyone who doesn't understand that phenomenon, that's typically when a parent or parents, they leave wherever home is. And so in our case, let's say they leave Jamaica, they leave the child back in Jamaica with family members to stay. And what they will do is they would pack these plastic barrels and send them back home. And it's usually with school things. It's usually with food supplies, whatever. Actually, I was teaching my son the other day to draw his foot. And I would tell him a story that whenever anyone was traveling to America, we would draw our foot on a piece of paper, cut it out and send it back. And he was like, "What?" I'm like, "Yes, we could have traveled." So, back then, no one said, and I thought about it. Why didn't someone say, "Kerry-Ann wears a size 6?" And I realized that, in Jamaica, we're getting American sizes and European sizes. And so maybe people just didn't really understand how to differentiate. So the easy, fail-safe way to make sure this shoe will fit, cut out our foot on a piece of paper, send it. And so they would place it in, so like little things like that. So it's usually with a care package. And it's usually maybe Christmas, right before school starts back. There's certain times of the year this barrel goes home and to care for the child and the people who are taking care of the child. And so what happens when reunification happens, when that child then reunites with the parents in America, and the complex layers that are happening there. So I've heard many stories about what that is or what that could be. And I think that episode is very helpful for me to understand what my cousin was experiencing. Because back then, to me, growing up, I'm like, "Oh, she gets all of the pretty clothes I'm foreign." And in her head, she was like, "Everybody have their mother and I don't have my mother." And so we are equating the clothes to, "Man, we get wicked nice clothes from America," to her wanting the parent because everyone else has parent. And so, as children, you don't understand it, but when it's when you're an adult, you can see like, aha, this is what was happening. And, as children, you can't really understand what it's like to not have a parent on because you're not in their shoe, and so it's very hard to empathize. And so the podcast has helped me to understand some of these experiences, empathize with some of these requests that you have to send money back home. And some aren't done. Not everyone who sends a barrel back home or sends money back home is doing so out of frustration, are annoyed. They're doing it because they know that's their responsibility. They have to take care of things back home. And this is, and sometimes I've seen situations where it's done as a shared responsibility between other siblings to do this responsibility. And I've also seen one where it feels like it is an obligation to do so, and not liking that obligation. So I've seen it both ways, and it's very interesting. But personally, I've never had to, I didn't feel that way, or my mother didn't feel that pressure that she had to do that. And then after a while, my grandmother came here, so we didn't really have the requirement to do that.
Good. That was good. That was good. I grew up around that happening all around me on both sides of the family. And today I look back and I say, I don't know how my parents' generation did it, because they weren't necessarily they didn't study here. They gave up their professions back on the island to come here and start over, and say how them stretch the money they were making to take care of home, the big house, and people around them. And every time people in the community show up, they have something to hand to them. I don't know how they did it. I'm still baffled. But they've done so much. And under immense pressure at time, and but they feel the responsibility and they do it. And I had a former guest who talked about she called it the black tax in certain black communities, like the African culture, and it's in other Asian culture as well, where if you're the one who is abroad, you're expected to either support another needy kid in the community. So she was sharing that she was working and making, say, if she make $500, she would send maybe 250 or 300 of that money back to a family who was needy in Nigeria, and how much of a pressure it is, and how sometimes people take advantage of people's efforts because then they are foreign, the lies and the stories that come up, and the manipulation that goes into that. It gets very complex when it comes to talking about like supporting the community back home, and sometimes it's life changing, and on the other hand it can become like this huge manipulation of people taking their money to be like extra hosts, or them take the money to build somebody's house, and the host might be built and the person arrive back, and it goes to the I've heard of stories of people setting people up to take them out, unalive the person so that they can keep the house on the property, or them show up and no house was built of all the money that they were sending back home. So it gets to be, it's a huge conversation.
I've heard I've heard of all those stories. I've heard of it. I think when my grandmother moved to here and she saw how quickly, saw all the things that we'd buy and how quickly kids outgrow things, and we would say, okay, we're putting that out, or we'd give it away to someone else. She said, no man, take it, come, let me take it and give it back to some pitney back home, or like my grandmother when she saw that, but it wasn't like someone asked her specifically. And again, these are some things that I'm grateful for. Like back then it was annoying. Like, grandma, why are you doing this? But it's out of what she felt was, I mean, she would look at it and say, but him know where the shoes but 2 time, come, you know, some pitney at Jamaica want this. And so she would have that care, and she was doing it not out of an obligation, but because she said, this is as good as new. I'm sure there are kids back home that could use this. And that's what she did. So
It's true. That is so true. My paternal grandmother, who passed at 93, was traveling way before my dad and us came, and she was always traveling back and serving the entire community, even up until in her, late years. People would just come to the house and they're looking, if we come, and she would say, leave that pair of sandals with me. I know I look a girl down the road there, I look a picnic who might need it. Even if me just buy it, and I need the pair of shoes. We end up leaving my stuff because she's, in her eyes, you don't really need it as much as this little child down the road in the community who might need it. So it's a huge discussion around balancing, your personal life with social impact and the dependence or the goodwill of towards others in the communities back home. One more question, if you don't mind.
okay.
Is there any humorous moment from your journey over the years where you committed some sort of faux pas? I like to end the show with this. Is there anything that you would be okay to sharing that today you just roll over laughing, like, oh my gosh, I so did not understand that social rule and I totally mess up?
Well, I mean, it is one that I didn't understand until much later when another guest came on the show sometime in around 2020. So I was in high school and we went on a trip somewhere for an event, and um, the young lady in my class, I don't remember what happened, and I did something. I don't remember what it was that I did. And I said, "Ush." And then I just walked away. Like I was like, "Ush," and then apparently she was upset for the rest of the trip. And people was like, "Kerry-Ann, this person is upset with her." But Mr. And I said, I told her, sorry, Mr. Ush. But it didn't connect in my mind, because when a Jamaican says hush, it means sorry. In
I'm
our,
sorry.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
sorry. Hush, hush. I don't mean anything by it, right? But I didn't realize that to her, and she's not Jamaican, hush for her was me shutting her up. I did not understand that,
Oh, yes,
right?
that's true.
I didn't realize that. And so it wasn't until another guest came on the show and said he was on his college campus and he bumped into this young woman and he was like, "Ush, ush." And he said the look on this her face was like, "How dare you tell me to hush and be quiet?" And then he realized, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. And so I look back at that and I laugh, but I'm also so sorry that I didn't even get an opportunity to explain that was clearly a miscommunication um, on my part, but I didn't understand because I took for granted. And that's the other thing. You want to be aware that even if I was in a culture or a school with a lot of Caribbean people, there's still a small percentage that's non-Caribbean. And I took for granted that she automatically understood the culture, whereas she didn't. And so when I said hush, I was saying I'm sorry and I was annoyed. I'm like, I told her sorry. How many times she want me to say sorry? But I did not realize that hush was not I'm sorry to her. It was be quiet to her. So
Oh, that is such a perfect story of how words mean different things in different spaces and different cultural settings, and how we can just easily miscommunicate and offend and upset people just by, you know, our interpretation of something that don't translate into another space. My
absolutely.
goodness, my goodness. That's a good one because I say hush all the time. I tell my Dasha, hush,
I
yeah.
still, yeah, I still use it. So it's not something that I stopped using. Ush, like it's just so natural for us to use, but I have to be mindful of who I use it to, because that's when the switching gets a little complicating because you don't always switch off and you have to catch yourself. But we use hush every day. It's a every
Yes,
it's
and
a
it's kind of a form of comfort. Oshia,
yes,
like
hush, yeah, yeah.
Oshia. And I interestingly, I'm thinking about I use it with my daughter a lot, but she was born here, is being raised a lot in an American context, and I wonder how does she interpret when mommy says that? I'm going to ask her. So that
Mhm.
now just opens a whole new. I wonder if she feels comforted or if she actually is interpreting the literal meaning of the word hush
You know,
versus the
I
cultural one that we use.
You'd be surprised. I think the kids pick up on context clues because, again, I just did this episode on Jamaican language, and I want to make sure my kids understands us. Like when we say "Oh, shall baby," it's not said in an aggressive tone. It's said in a comforting way. So they'll pick up. So I said to my son, I said, when I tell you ease up off of me, what does that mean? And he's like, get up off you. I said, yes, that's what it means, right? And I mean, I say it in the way like he'll be laying on my shoulder and I need to get up and I say, ease up off of me there, because I need to get up and go do something, but I'm not saying it in an aggressive way. So I think they'll understand it, but I think it's also a good exercise to ask your daughter, like, when I say this, what does that mean? Because they may go into their school environment and say something that is not culturally understood by their classmates or schoolmates, and that could cause the miscommunication issues as well. So yeah, absolutely.
So true. As we raise third culture kids in cultures that is so vastly different from the ones we were raised in, navigating that is very interesting. So I'm glad you're underlining that and making sure that our children are clear with the cultural meanings of things, because when they're home they live in a different country, and then when they go to school in an American school or wherever you find yourself around the world, they are in a second country.
So really quickly, when my son was much younger, I don't remember, I mean, he was just so Jamaica everything. And one day a mind said to say, baby, where were you born? He says, Jamaica. I was like, no, it's not Jamaica. because at his age, growing up in Jamaica, your date of birth, which hospital you're born, all of this. So I'm trying to make sure he knows that. So when he says Jamaica, like I was like, it's not Jamaica. You're born here. And but I think the reason why I tell that story is a testament to what he experiences at home. Everything is Jamaica to him. So he thinks naturally I must be born in Jamaica, and not thinking he was born here. Of course he knows he born here, but then it was funny. He was like, Jamaica? I was like, no, it's not Jamaica. So
Right. No, it's true because my little one has multiple children who were born to immigrant parents from other countries. And then the parents will come around and they'll say their child is their heritage. Say, for example, if the child has Mexican parents, the parent would say their child is Mexican, but the child was born in the US. So it can get confusing for the children. So I communicate and I say, you were born in the US with heritage from Jamaica, and so you don't necessarily you don't have to choose one or the other. You can be both. But it's up to you later on in your life to indicate what identity you want to take on as you understand the world. So it's an interesting way as to be parenting third culture kids and to be third culture persons or people, hybrid of our home and our newly adopted countries. Such an interesting experience. And I'm so happy you're covering the Caribbean diaspora experience and talking about the language and communication challenges that we have. It's so relevant. So folks, check out Kerry-Ann on the Kerry-Ann Friends podcast. She's everywhere you can find your podcast downloads. And she also has the Breadfruit Media Company that she does editing and other offerings as well. And, get in touch if you want to collaborate with Kerry-Ann. But thank you so much, Kerry, for joining us on the show today. This was such an excellent interview. We could keep talking for another hour, but,
I was about to say, so we can labrish for a long time. So,
we can keep labrish.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's always a joy speaking with you.
Thanks so much, Kerry-Ann. We appreciate you and appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Same to you.
We thank our listeners around the world, and we appreciate your continued support as we build our human library. Please remember to give us a 5-star review, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, and circle of influence.